So it appears that we will not be getting a budget until the fall. Just how far is your party willing to go to try to force this government to present some sort of fiscal snapshot this spring?
Well, we're using every tool that we have at our disposal. Ultimately, it's up to the government to table a budget, but we are currently every evening in the House of Commons going through departmental spending. That's one way that we're trying to get a picture for Canadians of just how bad the nation's finances are after 10 years of Liberal governments. We're using the days where we're able to propose motions in the House of Commons to demand the government table budget. The reason why this is important is because the cost of living crisis is still raging through Canada. Canadians are still suffering from high prices. The tax burden is still far too high. And the government is borrowing more and more money to pay for all these deficits that the Liberals are racking up. It's important that Canadians understand just how much of that borrowing is going on, because that government borrowing has an impact on inflation and interest rates and, of course, future taxes. So that's why we're trying to get to the bottom of all this.
When you say that you're using every tool at your disposal, just how far in a legislative sense does that mean? Like, are you considering the kind of like filibustering and delay tactics that were used in the fall?
Well, right now we're going through that departmental spending kind of line by line, department by department. As you know, in the last Parliament, there's a bit of a deadlock in the House of Commons because the Liberals refused to hand over documents related to a massive spending scandal, a massive corruption scandal. Right now in the House of Commons, that's not happening. That Liberal privilege motion it just doesn't exist after the election. So we're going to use our ability to pour through that departmental spending. We've got more debates tonight and again tomorrow night, and trying to hold up a picture to Canadians of how much of their tax dollar is going to interest payments on the debt after 10 years of Liberal deficits, what impact on inflation this continued borrowing will have, and whether or not the government's actually following through. You know, Mark Carney was claiming he was the man with the plan. He was the guy you hire in a crisis. And then he can't even come to Canadians with a budget to outline how he's going to tackle these key issues facing Canadians, like the housing crisis, like inflation, like the heavy tax burden that Canadians suffer from. More and more Canadians are going to food banks. We've heard tragic stories of seniors moving out of their homes to have to move in with their children, or in some tragic cases into their vehicles. So the cost of living crisis is still affecting so many Canadians, and Conservatives are really trying to expose all this Liberal mismanagement.
In terms of the government's main estimates, is it still your party's intention to vote against it?
Well, we had a situation last week where the government had, consider this, Mark Carney in his throne speech promised to cap departmental spending at 2%. In other words, that it would not grow by more than 2%. He then tabled estimates that had growth of 8%. This is just unsustainable. All this government debt washing around really means that more and more of your tax dollars goes to pay the interest on that debt. So bankers and bondholders get a big chunk of your tax payments, and future generations have to pay it back with higher taxes. So we don't support this level of spending. In a minority context, it's up to the government to try to find ways to get their legislation through and to get their spending through. But we're going to continue over the next few days to highlight all this wasteful spending, mismanagement, and corruption that is continuing to happen under Liberal Prime Minister Mark Carney.
If this was such a concern, I'm just curious, given the amendment that passed last week to the throne speech, Conservatives urging the government to table a spring budget rather than demanding, if this was such a concern, why use such weak language?
Well, there's parliamentary language that's used when the House of Commons calls on the government to do something that is in effect that the House is demanding it. It used to be in this country before 10 years of Liberal government that governments were meant to respect the will of Parliament. When the House of Commons votes in favor of something, that's the democratic expression of a majority of Canadians. And so what we saw last week was the elected representatives of a majority of Canadians called for the government to table that budget. You wouldn't operate your household. Small businesses don't operate their companies without some kind of budgetary planning, without some kind of plan. And when the government funds all its spending by taking tax dollars out of the pockets of hardworking Canadians. It has to justify where each and every one of those dollars go. And right now, we're not getting that with Mark Carney. It looks like he's continuing the Liberal track record that we saw under Justin Trudeau. It's continuing under Mark Carney. So Conservatives, this early days in this Parliament, we're going to keep using the tools we have as a strengthened opposition. We came back with many, many new seats, and we're going to continue to expose this Liberal waste and corruption.
So delay tactics still on the table. I have literally 10 seconds left.
Well, look, there's certain tools we have right now. As I said, we're using these evening sessions to go through that departmental spending one step at a time. We'll certainly have more to say as the days and weeks continue.
Okay, Mr. Scheer, unfortunately, I have to leave it there. I'm out of time. Thank you so much for making time for the conversation.